And we're singing along to Nick Zuber again tonight, as usual. Nick is a local musician here in Northeast Ohio, great musician, and if you ever get a chance to see him live, I would highly recommend it. He is truly an amazing talent. So welcome to Educational Norm. I am Norm Potter, your guest, not your guest, I'm your host tonight, and we're talking about creating hooks tonight for teachers and how to start lessons off the proper way. Before we get too deep into that, remember to subscribe to the channel so we can start getting more and more people into the channel. And I'll start posting these on Facebook also so people will have a chance to look at them there. I appreciate you coming in and watching tonight. Kyle, I'm doing a shout out to you because you reached out to me last week after watching this and had questions, which I do appreciate. And anytime you have those questions, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have or just clarifications, because I'm only going 10 minutes and I want to make sure that, you know, what I say makes sense and is something that you can use in the classroom. So tonight we're creating hooks. And I have to say that one of the things I truly enjoy doing is greeting the kids at the door as they come in. As much as I can, and I try to make sure I do that every day, every hour. But you know, teachers, we get caught up sometimes, and you're stuck in that classroom trying to wrap up the last class, or you know, switching materials out, or whatever it may be. I cannot say enough the rapport you build just being in the hallway and talking to kids and greeting them as they come to the door and having that happy face, especially if something's going on during that day that could bring them down right from the beginning. It's important that you greet them and you are positive and you have that opportunity to see them before class starts. Another major aspect that you can't understate is having that kid reaction, the first reaction that's given. And I call this the Claire Langton rule, and I don't even know where Claire's at anymore. I think she's in Northern Michigan, but Claire is a student of mine that she was super. I loved working with her as a student. And anytime I would give a project introduction, she would always be the first one in that class to speak up and say, "This is awesome." You know, just that very first reaction to what we were doing. And it really didn't matter what we were doing. Claire just loved school and loved life in general. And because of that tone that she set every day in class, when we did a project, the Claire rule kicked in. And as soon as she said it was good, things went really well. And on the other side, I won't mention the name of the student, but the very next hour, it was the opposite effect. He would always be the first one to speak. And sure enough, he would always be negative about it. And he would go off, and that's how the day went. It was a negative experience for most kids. So I started catching on to this, and I actually bribed the second kid with a free lunch pass to get him to the front of the lunch line the next day. If he were the first one to speak that day and he said something positive about what we're about to do, he did it, and it's amazing how well the class went. So it really was beneficial to have that positive voice outside of your own to help lead students into this next thing that you're doing, whatever it may be. So how do you create a positive hook, a hook that's going to get kids interested? And there are a lot of different ways. I often think that creating a mystery in your classroom, and I don't mean mystery as in, you know, Scooby-Doo type thing. I'm just thinking more along the lines that you come in one day and you have a prop on, and that prop could be something that I would do when I was doing history. I would come in with a crown, and the kids knew the crown was something special. They knew that that day was going to be something with the king of England that's going to happen, and they had to be on a certain type of behavior. And as soon as that bell would ring, they would be in their seats and just ready to go. They were focused. That crown really was my first real exposure to how important that first minute of class really is. And you can't do that all the time. You can't come in with a crown and just expect the kids to behave every single time or to be focused every single time. So you do have to mix it up. And that's where that mystery comes in. They sort of know the routine of what's going to happen, but if there's anything out of the ordinary, that catches their attention right away. And it's important that you do that in some of these things that you're trying to do. And establishing that routine does help when you do something different. It makes it stand out that much more. So as I just mentioned, the crown was something the kids recognized, and they knew after the first day of our living history class what that meant and what their behavior was expected to be and what their focus needed to be. Now, in that same history class, there were other times where I would show up and I would have a different prop on where they didn't know what that meant. But they knew that if they were in that classroom and I was wearing something other than my normal everyday teaching attire, that something special was going to happen with that person. There was going to be something that's going to need their attention, that's going to have to get them to focus and get them to really start thinking about whatever we've learned in the past to be able to apply it to the future. So those types of things really are beneficial. And we're getting to that term edutainment where you think you have to entertain the kids. This is not entertainment. This is a simple attention grabber that students can visually comprehend as soon as they see the door, they walk in the door, they see you, or as soon as the bell rings, you throw on that crown and they immediately know, oh, I got to do this. So it's one of those things where you have to condition them to a certain extent with your routine. And then those other things that you introduce could be those hooks that get them initially focused on the task at hand. Another thing that I love to do is we would do daily journal writings to do a hook. And the journal writings would be very simple and they were based on what if questions. The what if questions got them focused on thinking, A, but also thinking about the topic in a different way. So even if it's something that we've already studied, or I just wanted their opinion on, or I wanted to sort of get a gauge on where they were, almost like a pre-test, I would do these what if questions that are fun, can't be wrong, and really encourages kids to think differently than what they normally do. So, an example, and I would never do this in today's political environment, but back in the day, we could do this because politics was a little bit more civil than what it is now. But the question was, what if you owned a restaurant and you had to create two dishes? And the first dish was called the Obama special, and the second dish was called the John McCain special. What would those dishes contain and why? And those simple little questions, there isn't a wrong answer, but you do get a feel for what they know about politics. You get a feel for what they hear their parents talking about. You get a feel for their opinions without really saying their opinion. And I really enjoyed the creativity they showed. There was no wrong answer, but it was fun to hear people say, well, this person would be a pancake because of the flip flop, and this person would be a steak because they're tough. Those are the types of things that they started thinking about, the use of the symbolism into it. So those what if questions really are great. One that I used for science was, what if we all had our joints reversed so they would work the opposite direction? And what would that mean for fashion or for the different aspects or sports? And they got to pick the different aspect of life in general, how that would be impacted. And they had to tell me how the joints work currently, so they had to then switch it up and tell me how would they be different. It really does give you a good indication of what they do know. And something that I've learned over the years is that when you do any kind of project like this, you can tell the level that your students are at by the questions they ask. So if they ask a question that brings it to a higher level, they already understand the basics. So pay attention to the questions that they are asking. Um, Another thing that you could do as a hook is to leave objects or materials around the room and don't necessarily clarify right away what those are there for. You'll find that if you have in a science classroom a bunch of materials out for an experiment, they're going to ask a ton of questions. And you simply can respond by, we'll be using those shortly, and it's going to be critical that you understand how to use these and you get them hooked in right away because they see the material right there. Same thing with math. If you have a bunch of tanagrams or manipulatives that are there on the desk, they're going to ask what you're doing with them. And rather than telling them, I would just wait and hold off and say, you'll see, it's going to be fun, you'll see. And those types of anticipation pieces that you can do with very simple discussion are simple hooks that will get kids up and motivated and ready to go. So change your attire, add props, create what if questions, simple writing props that are fun, and then materials around the room. Simple, everyday things that you can do as a teacher to grab them right away and get them focused on what the material may be. Well, again, my name is Norm Potter. I'm the owner of Structured Creativity Consulting. You can find me at structuredcreativityconsulting.com, or you can email me at norm@normpotter.com, and I'll get back to you if you have any questions. So again, as always, be kind, be professional, and find solutions. Have a great night.
let's come together in the darkest night. May the strong hold the weak up to the light. Yeah, I am not a sinner nor saint, just a common man to see more love.